A photograph appeared on the monitor. Millie Bobby Brown's face completely changed. She stood up, put down her microphone, and walked off stage without saying a single word to Jimmy. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Studio 6B at Rockefeller Center. A Thursday night in October. The audience was packed, the energy was electric, and Millie Bobby Brown, one of the brightest young stars in Hollywood, was in the middle of what was supposed to be a fun, light-hearted interview about her latest project. Jimmy had been his usual animated self, cracking jokes, doing impressions, making Millie laugh with stories about meeting fans. She'd been vibrant, funny, completely comfortable in the spotlight she'd occupied since she was 12 years old. They were talking about her childhood, about growing up on sets, about the surreal experience of becoming famous so young. "So I heard you have some amazing throwback photos," Jimmy said, shuffling his blue cards with that familiar enthusiasm. "Our producers found some gems. Can we show them?" Millie laughed, settling back into her chair. "Oh no, this is going to be embarrassing." "That's the point." Jimmy grinned at the camera. "Okay, let's see what we've got." The first photo appeared on the monitor behind them, young Millie at a dance recital, maybe 7 years old, in a tutu. The audience cooed. Millie covered her face in mock embarrassment. "Adorable!" Jimmy exclaimed. "Okay, next one." Another photo. Millie at her first red carpet event, wide-eyed and nervous. More laughter from the audience. "One more," Jimmy said, looking at his producers. "I think we have one more." The third photograph appeared on the monitor. And everything stopped. Millie's smile vanished. Her entire body went rigid. The playful energy that had filled the studio seconds ago evaporated like water on hot pavement. Jimmy noticed immediately. He turned to look at the monitor, trying to see what had caused the shift. The photo showed a young Millie, maybe 9 or 10 years old, standing with an older man, gray hair, kind face, his arm around her shoulders. They were at what looked like a park, both smiling at the camera. "Millie?" Jimmy's voice had lost its performative quality, replaced by genuine concern. "You okay?" Millie didn't respond. She was staring at the photograph, her breathing shallow, her hands gripping the armrests of the guest chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The studio audience sensed something was wrong. The laughter died. 300 people suddenly uncertain, watching a 20-year-old actress freeze on live television. Millie stood up abruptly. The movement was jerky, uncontrolled. She lowered her handheld microphone toward the chair, missing it entirely. The microphone hit the floor with a dull thud that echoed through the suddenly silent studio. That night on The Tonight Show, a photograph appeared on screen and Millie Bobby Brown's face completely transformed. She stood up, put down her microphone, and walked off stage without saying a word to Jimmy, leaving the entire studio in shocked silence. Jimmy stood up too, instinctively, his interview cards scattering across his desk. "Millie? What's wrong? Talk to me." But Millie was already moving. Not toward the cameras. Not toward the audience. Away from the monitor. Away from that photograph. She walked quickly toward the backstage area, one hand over her mouth, her shoulders shaking. The Roots stopped playing. Questlove lowered his drumsticks. The cameras didn't know where to point. The director's voice crackled through the control room. "What do we do? Do we cut? Do we go to commercial?" Jimmy made a split-second decision. He looked directly into camera one and said, "We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us." The second the commercial sign lit up, Jimmy was off the stage, following Millie into the backstage area. Producers scattered, unsure whether to follow or give them space. Millie had made it to the green room before she collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands, her entire body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for 30 seconds that must have felt like hours. Jimmy entered quietly, closing the door behind him. He didn't approach immediately. He just stood there, giving her space, his face creased with concern. "Millie," he said softly, "what happened out there? What was that photo? She couldn't speak for a long moment. When she finally looked up, her face was streaked with tears, her carefully applied makeup running, her eyes red and raw. That was my grandfather, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That photo was taken 3 months before he died. Jimmy's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to deep sympathy in the span of a heartbeat. He moved to sit across from her, leaning forward, completely present in that moment. I didn't know that photo existed, Millie continued, wiping at her eyes with shaking hands. I've never seen it before. My mum must have sent it to your producers when they asked for childhood pictures. She doesn't know how much I... She broke down again, unable to finish the sentence. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. To understand what happened in that green room, you need to understand who Robert Fletcher was to Millie Bobby Brown. Millie's grandfather, her mother's father, had been her anchor during the chaos of her early career. When Millie was 9 years old and her family moved from England to Los Angeles to pursue her acting dreams, Robert had come with them. He'd sold his house in Bournemouth, packed up his life, and moved across the world to support his granddaughter's impossible dream. He was the one who drove her to auditions when her parents were working their multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. He was the one who helped her run lines, who sat with her in waiting rooms, who told her she was special when the rejection letters piled up. When Millie was 11 and got the call about Stranger Things, the audition that would change everything, Robert was the first person she told. He'd picked her up and spun her around their tiny apartment, both of them crying with joy. I always knew, he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. I always knew the world would see what I see. Robert lived to see Millie become a star. He was there for the premiere of Stranger Things Season 1. He walked with her down her first major red carpet. He sat in the audience when she won her first award and stood to applaud louder than anyone else in the room. But success meant travel. Constant travel. Press tours that spanned continents. Filming schedules that kept Millie away from home for months at a time. The moments with Robert became shorter, squeezed between obligations. I'll be back soon, Grandad, she'd say before leaving for another shoot, another interview, another appearance. I know you will, love, he'd reply, hugging her tight. Go make the world better. The last time she saw him was June 2019. Millie was 17, in the middle of promoting Stranger Things Season 3. She'd flown home to Los Angeles for exactly 48 hours between the London and Seoul stops of the press tour. Robert had looked friendlier than she remembered. Thinner. Tired. But his eyes still lit up when he saw her. They'd gone to the park, the same park from the photograph that would appear on the Tonight Show monitor 4 years later. They'd walked for an hour, talking about everything and nothing. About the show, about her co-stars, about normal life, things that felt increasingly distant from Millie's reality. Are you happy? Robert had asked her at one point, stopping to look at her seriously. Of course, Millie had said automatically. Then, more honestly, sometimes I don't know. Everything's moving so fast. Then slow down, he'd said simply. None of this matters if you're not happy. Remember that. A family friend had been with them that day, taking candid photos on her phone. Millie had forgotten about it entirely. Just another afternoon. Just another walk. 48 hours later, Millie was on a plane to Seoul. 2 weeks after that, she was in Atlanta starting to film her next project. Robert died 3 months later. A heart attack, sudden and catastrophic. Millie was in Atlanta when she got the call. She'd been in the middle of a scene, her phone buzzing in her trailer, her mother's name on the screen with that terrible news. The production gave her a week off. She flew back to England for the funeral. She gave a eulogy she barely remembered giving, standing in front of family and friends and trying to explain what Robert had meant to her when she couldn't even breathe properly. Then she flew back to Atlanta and finished filming because that's what professionals do. That's what Robert would have wanted. She threw herself into work with ferocious intensity, using the character she was playing as armor against the grief she couldn't process. She never looked at photos of Robert. Her mother had offered to put together an album. Millie had said no. It was too painful. Easier to just not look, not remember, not feel. For 4 years, that's how she'd survived. By not looking back. Until tonight, when a photograph appeared on a Tonight Show monitor, and the wall she'd built came crashing down. Behind the scenes, Jimmy made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. In the green room, Jimmy sat across from Millie as she explained everything through tears. About Robert. About the move to LA. About the last walk in the park. About never processing the grief because work never stopped. "I never even cried properly," Millie said, her voice breaking. "After the funeral, I just went back to work. I thought I was being strong. I thought I was honoring him by succeeding. But I never let myself feel it." Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Millie, I need to ask you something. Do you want to go back out there?" She looked up, surprised. "What?" "The show. We're in commercial, but we'll need to come back in about 3 minutes. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. We can say you felt unwell, we can run a pre-taped segment, we can handle this however you need. But—" he paused, choosing his words carefully. "But if you want to talk about this, about your grandfather, about what just happened, we can do that too. On your terms." Millie stared at him. "You want me to talk about this? On the show?" "I want you to do whatever feels right," Jimmy said. "But I'll tell you what I think. I think 300 people in that studio and millions watching at home just saw something real happen. They saw you leave. And if you go back out there and pretend everything's fine, they'll accept that. But if you go back out there and tell them the truth—" He smiled sadly. "Sometimes people need to know that even Millie Bobby Brown, superstar, global icon, is allowed to fall apart when she sees a picture of someone she loved and lost." Millie wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara further. "I look terrible." "You look human," Jimmy corrected. She took a shaky breath. "If I do this, if I go back out there, I need to keep that photo on the screen. I need to look at it." Jimmy nodded. "We can do that. And I need you to not make it easy. Don't comfort me too much. If I start to cry, let me cry. I need to actually feel this." "Okay," Jimmy said quietly. Millie stood up, her legs unsteady. "Give me 2 minutes to fix my face enough that I don't scare children." Jimmy smiled. "Take all the time you need. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming." When the show came back from commercial, the audience was silent. They'd been told during the break that Millie would be returning, but they didn't know in what capacity. Jimmy walked out first, settling behind his desk with an unusual somberness. He looked directly into the camera. "Welcome back. Before we continue, I need to tell you what just happened. My guest, Millie Bobby Brown, saw a photograph during our interview that brought back some very powerful memories. She needed a moment. And she's decided to come back out here and share something with all of us. So please welcome back Millie Bobby Brown." The audience applauded, but it was gentle, reverent applause. Not the wild cheering from her initial entrance. Millie walked back onto the stage. She'd wiped away the worst of the mascara streaks, but she hadn't reapplied makeup. Her eyes were still red. She looked fragile in a way she never allowed herself to look publicly. She sat back down in the guest chair. The photograph was still on the monitor behind them. Jimmy spoke first. "Thank you for coming back out. Thank you for letting me," Millie said, her voice rough from crying. "Do you want to tell everyone about that photo?" Millie turned to look at the monitor. At 9-year-old her, smiling in the sunshine. At Robert, his arm around her shoulders, both of them so happy. "That's my grandfather," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "Robert Fletcher. He moved across the world so I could chase this dream. He drove me to every audition. He told me I was special when nobody else saw it. And I lost him 4 years ago, and I never let myself grieve because I was too busy working. She looked at Jimmy. I saw that photo tonight, and I ran because I've been running from his memory for 4 years. But I'm tired of running. Jimmy reached across and took her hand. The audience was silent, many crying. He'd be so proud of you, Jimmy said quietly. I hope so, Millie whispered. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the show, Jimmy had that photo printed and framed. He gave it to Millie with a note. Stop running. He's always with you. Millie keeps it in her dressing room now. On every set. Every interview. Every premiere. Robert's smile watching over her, reminding her that it's okay to feel, to grieve, to be human. And 3 months later, Millie established the Robert Fletcher Foundation, providing support for families who sacrifice everything to support their children's dreams. The grandfather who gave up everything to help her fly now helps other dreamers take flight.